Welcome back. I'm Leann Findley Maxwell with Panther City Partners, and I'm so excited to have you here today to listen to more stories from Fort Worth of transition and change. And today I'm so excited to have my friend Christina Elbitar here with me today. Christina and her spouse own Chadra's, a wonderful restaurant in Fort Worth that it's got great food. You should come check it out, Italian and Mediterranean. But we met really through, I had seen you at Chadra's many times because that's where my family likes to eat on Wednesday nights for their buffet. But we met really through an organization that we've both been involved with called MACE, the Mexican American College Education Fund. Yes. And through that organization, the goal of that organization is to give scholarships to students, mostly students with a background that is Hispanic, to give them these small scholarships so that they can go to college to support the efforts of the Latina community for higher education. Right. And so that's where we started. But you, I know, have worked with some other organizations. If you don't mind telling us a little bit about those, that'd be awesome.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here.
Well, right now in my current position, I'm the state education chair for the Hispanic Women's Network of Texas. Specifically for our Latinas in Progress program that we have run here in Fort Worth for over 10 years. Yeah. So I'm doing that. And right now I'm just taking some of the practices that we've learned in our in Fort Worth and kind of helping our state develop programs all over. Okay.
So tell me a little bit about why, I know why I joined the group of MACE to work with Latinos and Latinas for higher education, but what do you think is important there? Like, why is that an organization that you have invested so much of your time and talents into?
I think when I started in college, when I was in high school, it was very difficult. And I don't think people were as supportive. They just didn't think that you were going to go far.
Why do you think that is? Because you're Latina?
Well, at the time, I probably didn't think it was that. I just remember once I would win scholarships or like if I won a big scholarship, I remember some of my counselors and teachers being shocked that I won it.
What?
Yeah. And
that's disheartening.
Yes, it was disheartening. And specifically, I remember one of my friends who's now a PhD in chemistry. Nice. Yeah. And when she was a senior in high school, she had really good grades, great grades. Our teachers told her, because her SAT score happened to be low, which now that I know is like a lot of Latino students have a lower SAT score.
It's a biased test.
Yes. And they suggested that she not go to a four-year college, that she consider something else. And I just remember hearing her tell me that. And I thought, gosh, I can't imagine being told that. Yeah. And it just seemed like a really big injustice to me.
Nobody was telling me that in high school, I have to say, right. And people were not saying that kind of thing to me. And I did not have great SAT scores either.
I know. And we were like in Magnet, we were in the talented and gifted, and her grades, she was top 10% of the class, a lot smarter than I was, just a little more into school than I was. And I just knew, I said, they wouldn't dare tell me something like that. I'd tell my mom and she would be so mad. And so I told her, she was very upset and shocked. And I just remember telling her, I said, I think you should do whatever you want to do. Yeah. I think you can do this. I know you can. I can't believe they told you that. And so she ended up getting all of her school paid for. Awesome. Up until she was a PhD. Everything was paid for. And so I think the shocking thing for me in that was that 10 years later, I still heard some of the same stories. And that made me feel, that gave me the push to help the girls a little more because, like I said, even now that still happens.
It does.
Yeah. And especially in my school, if you weren't the top 10 or top 5% or a favorite, I just remember they would always get pulled out of class to receive information about scholarships or things like that. So I always had to search myself. Right. So the ones that I won were because I actively sought them.
There was nobody there telling you, hey, you should try for this one, Christina. You were having to do all that research on your own.
I did. And I had one counselor who wasn't assigned to me that actually helped me a lot.
Good.
And she just saw me in there all the time. And she it would just encourage me and help me fill things out if I had questions. So it's just like, sometimes I think it just takes one person.
Yeah, it really does to believe in you and really spark that.
Right.
So your activism for Latinos and Latinas in college and your support of helping students get there really started when you were in high school, it sounds like, with supporting your friend saying, hey, you should do this no matter what people are telling you.
Yes. I mean, and looking back, I mean, I am first generation. My brother was older than I was, and he had already graduated from college, but there was just so much stuff I didn't know.
Yeah.
Even though I was always college bound, entering my freshman year of college was a little difficult. I ended up transferring later and making a better decision for myself. At the time, I actually had picked a college that didn't even have the major I wanted to pick.
Yeah, because you just didn't know to look for that
I
kind
had
of
no
thing.
idea. I had no idea what to do. I mean, my parents were extremely supportive, and financially, especially, they paid for my school, which is a huge gift even to this day. So I didn't have to struggle with that, but it was a lot of the other things. So
yeah, that makes me think about, my parents had gone to college and my parents were educators. And so they did have some institutional knowledge, but even they didn't understand everything because they had gone to college so many years before I had gone. So thinking about it from the perspective of a parent who doesn't have any experience with that, how in the dark that they can feel, and then they can feel like I can't help my kid. And that's a frustrating place to be in as a caregiver to kids. Like, I don't feel like I can help them.
Right. And I think as a student, identifying at what point you really do need help.
Right.
Because the kind of help that you need in college is different from high school.
Sure.
And people aren't as forgiving. There is help out there.
Right.
But if you don't know when to ask before it's too late, or thinking you can take care of it on your own, it can get overwhelming.
Right. There's not as much of a safety net in college as there is in high school.
No.
At all, in fact.
Yeah, not that much. And a lot of it, I think most of the time, especially a first generation student, is used to doing it all by themselves. And you can do it, and you do it by yourself, but you don't have to struggle.
Right. So when you're working with these young women and helping them to make that transition to college, you're starting to work with them in high school, right? And then do you continue that relationship with them throughout their 4 years or 5 or 6 years of college, or how does that work?
A lot of them, once they get into college, they do know that they can come back and talk to us, and we are always a resource for them, which is one of the reasons why I did go into MACE, because a lot of our girls were receiving those scholarships, and I wanted to keep up with them. But it is a wonderful education program, because right now we are definitely seeing them come back and help and assist us, and they're just so smart and they know so much. Right. And it's really exciting to see where they have become. So we invest our time and we invest scholarships, but I mean, they've really just done so well.
Right. They've really blossomed. So what are some of the things that you're teaching them and through the programs about that transition into college?
I think a lot of times we definitely tell them to put themselves first in their education and what that really looks like.
That's really hard a lot for Latinas to do, because they're often helping so much with their family that it can be hard to put themselves first.
It is hard. One of our first sessions, we actually have the parents show up and we talk to them separately, and we have some of our LIP alum come back and they come with their parents. This last year, we had one come with her father who really didn't speak English, but she was able to share how he supported her in any way he could. Right. So, and she's been successful, and she's an attorney now, and she's doing really awesome things. But yeah, that's definitely one of the things. And how it's not like you're saying no to your family, right? But certain family obligations you just maybe can't attend. Like you can't always go to the weddings, the quinceañeras, the birthdays, all the barbecues. And especially, I think they have a lot more problems when they are in the same town.
Yes, I've noticed that. The students that I work with who live in the same city that their parents still, I mean, they go to college in the same city that their parents, the expectation is that they come home more frequently.
Or they're still a part of that family unit that might be required to pick up pick you up or pick up your kid, your sibling from school, do those kinds of little things that sometimes take up a lot of time, but you just don't realize, especially some of the students that live at home, they have a harder time putting themselves first.
Right.
Especially
and their education first.
Right.
Right. So that's the first thing really is put yourself and your education first. You have worked hard for this and now it needs to be your priority. What's the next thing that your organization teaches these young ladies?
How to communicate with your professors.
Yeah, that's an important one.
Yeah, and how important it is to be in the front and how important it is to be engaged and what that looks like and not to be scared to speak to your professors early on in the game, not towards the end when you really need them.
I know. I always tell them, go talk to your professor on a positive note. The first time you interact with your professor should be something good.
Yeah.
So that later when you go back with a problem, they know, hey, I've already met with this person before.
Yeah, I mean, and you're paying to be there and they want to help you succeed. I mean, they have a vested interest in that too. I mean, they want their students to succeed.
Right.
And our program has a lot of professors in it.
Oh, great.
So I think that it's really empowering to see just how much they really do care about you. And especially when they come in on a Saturday and help and talk to the girls, I think it really just opens their eyes and how much they're really going to learn and what class participation really looks like during class. Those things are important.
You know, one of the things I find is that in K through 12, we are, I used to be a teacher, like we're constantly teaching the students that the teacher is in charge of their learning and the teacher is going to help you. If you don't understand something, let me figure out how I can help you learn this, or let me be in charge of your learning. And then we switch that paradigm when they go to college where the student really is in charge of their own learning, but it is not something they're familiar with. And so navigating that of being in charge of your own learning, it looks way differently. It looks way different in college. So can you speak to that a little bit about the things that you're trying to impart to these students while they're still in high school and living this paradigm of their teacher being in charge of their learning? Like, it's going to be different when you get to college.
Well, our whole premise is to treat them as if they are in college.
Oh, great.
So that we ask that they initiate conversations and not their parent. And when their parent does, we ask them to go back and talk to their student because, I mean, you see all different kinds of parents.
Sure.
But the only way that they're really going to learn how to stand up for themselves is to speak for themselves.
Right. They have to be their own advocates.
Yes. And so that's very important. And we hold them accountable and responsible for their own deadlines, for their scholarships, for all of that information, showing up when they sign up.
Yeah.
Because we're all volunteers.
Right, right.
So once you commit to something, you really need to commit.
And it sounds like one of the things that y'all are doing is treating them like adults. And so they need to be acting like adults. And that can be hard, especially at home when your parent or an organization wants you to be an adult, but they don't want to treat you like an adult. And so y'all are really practicing there what you're preaching of, like, if you're going to be an adult in college, you need to start being an adult now. And that's what this looks like.
Right. And I think a lot of them have had that parent or teacher relationship.
Right. And
definitely when you go into college, that professor-student relationship is different. And then the relationship that we want to build with them as a mentor, as a potential friend, when we're all, when they're older and graduates, our roles change again.
Sure.
But it's the first time that some of them have seen professional Latina women that look like them, that are successful, that are genuinely just there for them to succeed.
Right.
And just because we're there doesn't mean their journey is not going to be difficult. It just means that we're giving them some resources to help them.
I think that's important because I think that journey and that transition to college, regardless of what your background is very difficult. And I don't think we talk enough about that. When I was working at TCU, I had the student come in my office and she, with all seriousness, looked at me and said, "Nobody told me college was going to be hard." And she had such disdain and just like she felt like the rug had been pulled out from under her. Like, I didn't know it was going to be this hard when I got here. And so it's awesome that y'all are having those conversations with them because the journey for college for a Latino or Latina is going to be different than if you're white, and it is probably going to be harder. And so having that conversation, being really upfront and honest about that early. Do you find that that's been helpful for your students?
I think so. I think also having more access to the colleges. Every meeting that we do have is on a college campus. So we try to give them that experience as well. Freedom is a big one too. Not really knowing how to manage all of their time. Because sometimes I feel like the more time you have, the more time you have to goof around.
Exactly.
And just personal expectations. I think a lot of the girls that we do have are harder on themselves. Of
course.
And so when they find that things aren't as easy for them as maybe they used to be, it discourages them. And they just need to realize that their journey is not set by their college assignments, like you have to finish in 4 years. Right. That it's their journey, and they're going to build it, and they're going to design it. And putting yourself first also means mental health and your own health. So if you can't take the required 16, 17, 18 hours in a semester in order to graduate, then it's okay.
Right. Right. You can have that non-traditional path. I've talked about this many times with my clients, but also with the guests on the podcast of like, we grow up thinking that there is just one way and there's one path, and you go to college, you get a job, and you stay in that job forever, and that's what your life looks like. But that's, for the vast majority of us, that is not the reality. And sometimes we take college more slowly. Took my mom 9 years to graduate from her undergrad degree because she was like working and supporting my dad and having children and all that kind of stuff. And to know that, telling them up front that it's okay, your college journey does not have to look like everybody else's. And I don't think it's not very common for someone to graduate in 4 years anyway. It's not as realistic. And if you have to take a gap year, which is a new term I had to learn several years ago, it's okay. And people shouldn't be hard on you for taking a break if you need to take a break. And you shouldn't be hard on yourself for taking a break. But you know that you can go back. It will be there. That's what one of my guests said. College will be there. It's not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere. And so sometimes your path might look a little different from other ones. But I don't know if people actually, after you've graduated, you don't really talk about that. No, you don't. And so it is important for them to hear from us that we all have our own journeys. It's all taken different, lengths of time, and we've all done it differently, but we've all graduated. Right. And we're successful. Yeah. And we give back. Yeah. So please do all those things. Yes. What would you say, you touched on this a minute ago of like having students see these Latina women who are successful, who have graduated from college, who are mentors. What do you think that does for a student to finally see somebody like themselves? And how does that help them see themselves in those roles? I feel a lot of our girls have shared some stories. And one of them in particular was pretty interesting with me. And she's one of the students that I've just maintained a relationship with. And when she was in college working on a business project, she said that the professor had asked them to go back and interview somebody that had graduated, that had a career in certain fields. And she said she had never felt so out of place before. And it was so difficult because she thought, gosh, I don't know who I'm going to ask. And all of the students around her are like, oh, I'm going to ask my uncle. I'm going to ask my cousin. I'm going to ask my mom or dad. And she said she couldn't think of anyone. Wow. So she actually left crying because that was one of the first times that she felt that she really wasn't on the, level playing field with all of them. And it was just really difficult. And so she happened to reach out to me. And I did spend time with her and filling out her survey. And, I've done that for several of the girls. I just didn't realize what an impact that would make on her. Yeah. And so she said that she just felt extremely grateful that she did have a resource and someone to go back and contact because she really didn't have anybody. Wow. That's yeah. So crazy. It's the little things. Yeah. And that, I think, happened 2 years after she had already graduated from our program. Wow. Wow. So it's awesome that she had that resource to come back to y'all. But it does highlight that idea that even without necessarily meaning to be, biased or point out her difference, that's what happened in that class. The professor she felt singled out because her life was different. Right. That's hard. It's hard to hear. Because that seems like such a benign situation. Like the professor is not thinking, oh, some of my students may not have somebody to talk to. It's just like you You would just, as a college professor, you would just think, oh, everyone has somebody like this. But the reality is that is not true.
I mean, and it is important. I mean, I've shared with some of the girls too, who say maybe they've gone to a college that is known for their students having more wealth. Maybe they're there on a full scholarship, and they have had some problems too adjusting or listening to conversations in their classroom, maybe over after coming back from spring break and hearing about all their extravagant trips and their new cars, and how difficult that is sometimes for them to hear, and they realize, wow, I'm really different. I just have nothing in common. But I do push them to get to know people that aren't like them, because I told them that's what it's going to be like when you're out in the job force. You know, not everyone is going to be just like you anymore. Just because in public school we are in our neighborhoods and we're a little more sheltered, and we grew up with them since we're little kids. And I always encourage them to do something different, maybe something that they're not used to. And then I tell them, I said, your first generation, I said, maybe your child is going to be that person that's talking about how they went to Italy for spring break. And that always has them, you know, I get that little pause, and they're thinking, wow, I'm not that far away from it. And that's really what an education can do for you. It just provides you with all these great opportunities that you wouldn't have been able to have as much access to.
And that's important for all students, but especially a group of students like Latinos and Latinas, because our state is moving more towards being more Latina and Latino. And so we need to be realizing that these experiences are for everyone, not just certain people.
And they are for everyone. I mean, you know, I'm just speaking specific to being Latina because that's my experience, but it is still there. It doesn't matter what your race or demographic is.
Yeah. You touched on this a second ago too, and I think that the students that I work with for academic coaching, often their parents contact me or the student contacts me because they think that they need academic help. And what's really happening is that they actually need help with that transition of like changing. Your life is so different in college, and it's not necessarily the academics that you're struggling with. It is that transition, that life transition of not being at home, you're expected to do more things for yourself than you did before. Can you speak to how y'all talk about that transition with your students?
Well, specifically with the parents, we just kind of teach them how to be supportive, how to call or text, or, you know, just make sure they're okay. I have a niece that's still in college, and I try to do that regularly. Like every week, I just send her a text. Hey, how are you? How's school? You know, we're thinking about you. We love you. I'll call her. I keep her involved. Like let's say I went out to dinner with her grandfather, who's my father. I'll send her a picture. And so sometimes when they're away, you think that they need to be studying and you don't want to bother them, but you still need to keep them engaged with your family and let them know that you think about them. And whenever you do think about them, just send them let them know. And I think when I was in college, I felt lonely a lot.
I did too.
And I don't think a lot of my family really realized how to reach out, but it's just as simple as that.
That's a really good idea, because you don't think about that when your kid is going off to college, or your niece or a family member is going off to college, that they still need to feel that connection. And it's harder for them to sometimes reach out, because you said it's hard for people to ask for help sometimes. But knowing that support is still at home can do a lot for their mental health, as well as their academic, and their academic stress. But I mean, if they know that those people are still at home supporting them, and they're reminded of that, and they're reaching out, it makes it easier for them to reach out if they do wind up needing help later.
Right. And I, in my role as the state education chair, I go every quarter to Austin, and we have a meeting, and I do stay a couple days extra, and we hang out together. And I try to spend some time with her, and I feel so honored every time she wants to spend time with me.
I know. As they get older, I'm like, do you still like me?
I know, right? And so it's always been really, fun to get to bond with her like that. And you just honestly get to learn a little more about her than you probably wouldn't have. I try to see her dorm and try to experience all of that. So
that's so cool because you're going into her space and choosing to see her as an adult, where
Right.
it's so easy, like when they come home from college, to continue to see them as a kid. Like I remember that from like a family dynamics class that I took in college of like, it's so easy
that is interesting.
to revert back to those familial roles when you get home. Even if she's been out for years, when she comes home, she's still the youngest daughter or whatever
Right.
her role is. And so when you've taken that effort to go and see her in her space and see her as still part of the family, but as her own person, that can do a lot for her to think, okay, yes, I'm making good choices, or this person supports me, or this person sees me as an adult, not just as a child.
Yeah. And I mean, don't want to keep talking only about her, but
She's just the most familiar.
I know. But I think it was her freshman year, and we, my husband and I went down to visit her, and we took her grandfather, which is my father. Mm-hmm. And we just had this really, I think, a very beautiful family moment. Mm-hmm. And I just thought, wow, how lucky she is, because we were all sitting down, we were having ice cream, and she was kind of sharing a little bit of her stress. Mm-hmm. And she got a little overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. And my husband and I just kept telling her, like, you know, you can do this and you've got this. And, mm-hmm. you know, if you need help, like, we'll pay for whatever we need to help. You know, investing in you is in our family, and mm-hmm. We give scholarships to kids we don't know. So of course we're going to help you.
Right.
You know, and she just was talking about how she felt bad asking, or like, mm-hmm. I would rather not go out to dinner with my friends if it meant that I had to help you. Mm-hmm. And so my father was just eating his ice cream on the side. And then out of nowhere, he was, he stopped and he looked at her, and he's just like, you know, you're my granddaughter, and you can do this, and you've got this, and you're, you know, I know that you're going to be okay. And then everyone started crying. Yeah. And I thought, you know, here's this, you know, 82-year-old man and her niece, and, you know, her mom, I mean, aunt mm-hmm. and uncle, and her mom and dad had just been to visit too. And I thought, wow, that's the difference between a first generation and a second generation mm-hmm. kid. Mm-hmm. And just that kind of support, and the support that we knew we needed to give her, and right. what that really looked like
right
at that moment. Mm-hmm. And it was very powerful. And I remember there was a man sitting around the corner from us, and he had 2 small children. And when he walked off, I guess he had heard our whole mm-hmm. conversation. And I mean, everyone was crying. Yeah. And he walked off, and he just kind of smiled at us. And I thought, you know, you're not going to be too far from this.
Right.
But it's hard to explain the differences. And that was definitely, to me, one of them.
Yeah. Because you knew you had experience of being a college student yourself, and to kind of have some idea mm-hmm. of the needs that she had at that moment. Whereas when you went to college, your dad and mom didn't have those same experiences. Right. And so they didn't know your needs at that moment. Yeah. That's very cool.
They helped me so much.
Oh, of course.
I probably didn't tell them everything I needed to tell them, and they didn't ask me things they probably should have asked me.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense. That makes perfect sense.
Right.
So if you had to give one piece of advice to a student going off to college, what would that be? What do you think is your, like, this is what you need to know? Or maybe 1 or 2 things. You don't have to only give one.
The pressure.
Yeah.
I think what I've stated before, it is your journey. Mm-hmm. You need to take a hold of it, be accountable, be responsible for it. Put your education and yourself first. Mm-hmm. It's an investment in yourself for 4 years.
Right.
And try different things, do different things that aren't always in your own race, things that don't always feel comfortable.
Right.
Because it's your only opportunity to really grow and experience and learn different cultures and meet different people. Mm-hmm. And always education is first. Study. Prioritize your study. Sometimes you can forget those things, but study.
Yeah. You're here for education. So put it first and experience as much as get as much out of this opportunity as you possibly can.
Right.
Because when you go to work, you're going to have new and different experiences, but they're not going to be the same things that you had access to when you were in college.
Right.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you so much for your time today, Christina. I really enjoy learning from you about, that transition off to college. You've seen so many students through that program go through. And so you just have a wealth of knowledge, and that that transition from high school to college. So thanks for your time. I really appreciate it. And to our listeners, thank you so much for your time and sharing yourself with us. Thank you for sharing your stories and following on Instagram, Panther City Partners, downloading the podcast at your favorite podcast platform. Please continue to do so. Remember, the only constant is change, but you don't have to go it alone. Thanks, Leann Maxwell with Panther City Partners. Have a great day.